What if I told you that every single dollar you saved last year was stolen? Not by a thief. Not by a hacker. Not by some criminal breaking into your account at 3 in the morning. By a system. A legal, government-approved, carefully managed system that has been transferring wealth from the people who work for money, to the people who own things, for over 100 years. It has a name. It is called inflation. And everything you have ever been told about it, is a lie. They told you inflation is natural. They told you it is unavoidable. They told you 2% is healthy. Every single one of those statements was designed to make you accept something you should be furious about. Here is the official story. The one you heard in school, read in newspapers, and watched economists explain on television with calm voices and expensive suits. Inflation, they say, is simply the natural rise in prices over time. It happens because the economy grows. Because people spend more. Because supply and demand fluctuate. They call 2% the golden target, low enough to feel stable, high enough to encourage spending over saving. They make it sound like weather. Like something that happens to everyone equally. Like gravity, unavoidable, neutral, and beyond human control. Inflation is not weather. Inflation is a policy. And like every policy, it has winners and losers. The question they never ask on television is this: if prices go up for everyone, why do some people get richer during inflation while most people get poorer? If it is neutral, why does the gap between the wealthy and everyone else widen every single time inflation rises? The answer is not complicated. But it is deliberately hidden. When a government needs money it does not have, for wars, for bailouts, for stimulus packages, it has two options. Tax people directly, which is politically unpopular. Or print new money and inject it into the economy, which is invisible to most people and requires no vote. When new money enters the system without new goods or services to match it, each existing dollar becomes worth slightly less. The money supply expanded. The purchasing power of every dollar you already own contracted. You did not lose money from your account. Your account shows exactly the same number. But that number now buys less food, less rent, less of everything. They did not take money from your wallet. They made your wallet worth less. That is the genius of it. And that is the crime of it. In 2020 and 2021, the United States government printed more money in 18 months than had been printed in the previous 250 years combined. By 2022, inflation hit 40-year highs. Groceries, rent, energy, everything surged. Coincidence? That is what they called it. Supply chain disruptions, they said. Global factors beyond anyone's control. But the billionaires who owned real estate, stocks, gold, and commodities. Their net worth exploded during those exact same years. Because when you print money, the new dollars flow upward first, into financial assets, into property, into the investments owned almost exclusively by the already wealthy, before trickling down to raise the price of bread. Now here is where it becomes personal. For generations, the advice was simple and universal. Work hard. Spend less than you earn. Save the difference. That is how you build security. So millions of people did exactly that. They sacrificed. They did not buy the new car. They skipped the holiday. They kept money in savings accounts earning 1%, maybe 2%. Meanwhile, inflation ran at 4, 6, 8%. That responsible saver, the person who followed every rule they were taught, lost 2, 4, 6% of their real wealth every single year. Not because they made bad decisions. Because the system punishes the behavior of saving while rewarding the behavior of owning assets. Saving money in a bank during inflation is not responsible. It is a slow-motion robbery that you volunteered for because no one told you the rules. The bank pays you 1% interest on your savings. It lends that same money out at 7, 8, 12%. It profits from the spread. And when inflation runs higher than your interest rate, you lose purchasing power every month while the bank profits. You are not a customer. You are the product. Let us be specific about who benefits from inflation. Asset owners win. Anyone who held real estate, stocks, gold, or commodities during high inflation watched their net worth rise, not because they became more productive, but because the measuring stick itself shrank. Debtors win. If you owe $100,000 on a mortgage at a fixed interest rate, inflation is your best friend. You pay back that loan with dollars that are worth less than the dollars you borrowed. Governments win. Sovereign debt becomes easier to repay when inflation erodes its real value. Savers lose. Fixed income workers lose. And those people are almost always the working and middle class. Let us talk about that 2% target. 2% annual inflation sounds harmless. Over 10 years, it reduces purchasing power by 18%. Over 40 years, the length of a full career, 2% inflation destroys more than 55% of your purchasing power. They chose 2% because it is slow enough to be invisible year to year. Fast enough to constantly pressure people to spend rather than save. 2% is not a safety target. 2% is the speed limit on the highway to making you poorer. Here is what the wealthy do. They do not store wealth in currency. They store it in things. Real estate. Stocks. Commodities. Businesses. This is not a secret. Step 1. Keep only 3 to 6 months of expenses in cash. Nothing more. Step 2. Begin converting excess savings into inflation-resistant assets. Index funds. Real estate investment trusts. Even modest, consistent investment in productive assets compounds dramatically over decades. Step 3. If you carry fixed-rate, low-interest debt like a mortgage, understand that inflation actually works in your favor. Every time you go to the grocery store and feel that quiet frustration at prices higher than last month, that is not bad luck. That is policy. Every time your savings balance looks the same but feels like it buys less, that is not your imagination. That is the designed outcome. The solution is not to be angry. Anger without action changes nothing. Stop storing your life's work in a currency that loses value by design. Start converting it into assets that rise when inflation rises. Drop a yes in the comments if you have ever felt like you are working harder and falling further behind at the same time. Subscribe right now, because next week I am going to show you the exact 5 assets that protect your money during inflation. Assets that billionaires quietly buy every time the government starts printing. They built this system. They printed the money. They wrote the rules. But they cannot stop you from learning how to use those rules against them.